Hi team, it's FretDojo time. Okay, so today we're going to look at the 5 core principles of left-hand technique. These principles are very, very important, affect every other aspect of your guitar playing, very high leverage to practice. Okay, let's do it. No matter what level of guitar playing you might be at the moment, left-hand technique is one of those things that you really should be looking at again and again as you rack up the practice hours on your instrument. Left-hand technique is very important because if you don't have good left-hand technique, it can potentially cause you physical injury, especially if you practice a lot. It can also stifle your musical expression. You know, if you're very tight and tense in your left hand, you won't be able to say what you want to say on the guitar. And it'll slow you down. You know, speed issues that guitarists have can often be attributed to poor left-hand technique, holding too much tension, or holding the guitar incorrectly. So improving your left-hand technique shouldn't be a mystery. It's actually pretty straightforward as long as you have the correct information, which is what this video is hopefully all about. There's a lot of misinformation actually in guitar books that I've seen about the placement of the left hand, so I thought this would be a good opportunity to clear that up today. And if you head over to the post about this lesson on my website, you'll be able to find a summary of all the points that I'm talking about today in this video. Okay, so enough introduction, let's get straight into these 5 principles of how to have awesome left-hand technique. Let's get into it. Okie dokie, so let's get into these 5 principles of awesome left-hand technique. The first principle is fairly obvious, I think, but if you are doing this and you're not realizing it, even though you know you shouldn't be doing it, you're going to have a lot of problems. It is keeping your hand nice and relaxed. If your hand is very tense when you play, if you put down the fingers with a lot of tension, if your wrist has a lot of tension, you're going to find your music playing is going to suffer a lot. So the first principle you should look at is in any fingering passage, any scale passage. Is the hand moving nice and free? Are you feeling good there? And is your hand nice and loose? So this is the first principle you should be looking at. Even if you just do this one and you feel an improvement there, you're going to see a huge improvement in your guitar playing. Alright, so the second point now of a great left-hand technique, it has to do with the position of the thumb. This poor fellow is often ignored because of all the fancy things the fingers are doing over this side. So the thumb is actually one of the most important elements that can influence the ease of motion for the left hand. So you might have seen in a lot of guitar books that, especially classical guitar books, that you need to keep your thumb in the middle of the neck. Now, if I try to do that, when I play, sometimes it feels good depending on what I'm doing, but if it's rigidly in the middle like that, you'll find that your wrist is compromising its position. It's harder to get ease of motion in the fingers. It all feels very rigid. So this is actually very bad advice. I'm going to be controversial here and definitely say you should not leave your thumb in the middle of the neck the whole time. But the thumb position is actually kind of no position really. Depending on what you're doing, it's very flexible in the position that it assumes. So let's say I'm doing a bar chord. Yes, definitely the thumb will be in the middle of the neck. If I do an open chord, will sit more on the side of the neck, poking up a little bit, especially around a narrower neck like this guitar. Okay, if I'm playing a scale pattern, let's say, did you see the thumb move up higher and higher as I went to the higher strings? So when I go to the lower strings, the thumb comes around, and when I come to the higher strings, it has to do with the wrist. If I don't do that and I try to play the lower strings with the thumb still being around here, the wrist position will be compromised. But it's okay over here. So you can see that the idea here is to keep the wrist as straight as you can, and that's facilitated by the thumb position. So in general, a good kind of general position to start with is to have it around this edge of the guitar, the kind of top edge facing you as you're looking down at the guitar. And that's kind of your starting position for basic kind of open string scales and melodies and things like that. And but when you start to do other techniques, bar chords, open chords, full scale runs, the thumb will shift and change position and be very flexible. So that is a very, very important point that I don't think is covered enough when people are talking about left hand technique. Okay, the third principle is finger pressure, not having too little finger pressure or too much. If you've got too little finger pressure, you'll have that sort of sound happen. If you've got too much finger pressure, you might sound okay, however, your speed will definitely suffer if you can't play with the appropriate amount of pressure. You won't be able to play scales fast enough, and also it'll lead to the problems with tension as we've discussed earlier. So to help get the right amount of finger pressure, there's a little exercise you can do, which ironically involves learning to buzz the strings. Let me show you. So let's say I play some chromatic notes on the second string here. I'll play them normally first. Now I'm just going to play them trying to just buzz the notes. It's not as easy as it seems. There we go, there's the right amount of pressure for a buzz. So why would I want to do that? Why would I want to actually buzz the strings and practice that? Well, because if you learn the amount of pressure to buzz the strings, then you only need a slightly bit more pressure to play the strings well without excessive tension. So I'll play a little scale now. And you hardly need any pressure to buzz the strings. Now I'm just going to add the sort of keep playing the note until it doesn't buzz anymore, and that way I'll get the correct kind of gauge of the pressure I need. That's good. And just stop there. Don't put any more pressure on after the note sounds right. And that way you can teach your hand the correct amount of finger pressure. So the fourth principle has to do with the placement of the fingers in relation to the frets. So most of you probably know if you play too far away from the frets, even if you're pressing quite hard, you'll buzz. So in general, it's a good idea to keep your fingers as close to the frets as possible. However, you'll probably find there's some situations, let's say I do a chromatic scale down here in the first position. See, those two fingers can be quite close to the frets, but even with my large hands, see finger 3, if we look a bit closer there, it has a slight distance away. That's just because of the natural place that my third finger falls when I'm doing a chromatic scale. And the fourth finger, it's actually quite uncomfortable to try to have that finger placed all the way up but against the fret. So fingers 3 and 4 in a lot of cases do tend to play a little bit away from the frets. Now, and chords are another good example. Let's take this A minor chord. As you can see, the second finger in this A minor chord is quite a distance away, and it's very uncomfortable to have that finger too close to the fret. So keeping the fingers at appropriate distance depending on the situation that you're in. Now, the other thing I should mention here is to do with left hand angle, if you know what I mean. So I've grouped these two principles together, the finger placement and also the angle, because they're very much related. Let's say I'm playing a scale up here on the fifth fret here, or fifth fret's here actually. Here we go. So just try to get it in shot properly. So if I keep my hand in a very rigid position, it's very hard to get that fourth finger to sit in close enough to not buzz the note. So you slightly change the angle like this of the hand as you play. Now this will means that you can reach more when you need to on this side of the hand and reach more when you're going down for the notes on the first finger. So I'll show you how that would look. It's very subtle. It's not like you have to overdo it back and forth like this. If you have smaller hands though, you will need to move more than me. See? I'm overdoing it slightly to demonstrate. Okay, so now I'll show you a bit more sped up and not so obvious. Okay, so that's a summary of how to adapt the angle of the left hand and also the placement of the fingers to facilitate no buzzing and also ease of motion. Okay, so the fifth and final principle that I'll show you today on left hand technique is a little bit more subtle than the other points that we've gone through, but it's definitely by far the most powerful, and kind of you should keep this in mind when you're applying all the other principles. So let's say I take this piece here and it's not feeling good to play. I can play it, but something's not quite right. If something isn't working quite well there, I'd ask myself, how does my hand feel at this point? What is my body telling me in the fingers, in the hand, in the arm, in the whole rest of the body as well? Not just sort of isolate your observation of the feeling that your body's trying to communicate to you. So your body really is the best gauge as to whether a technique works for you. Now, this is very important to keep in mind if you get, say, a guitar lesson off someone and they give you some exercise to do or show you a particular hand position and it just isn't working for you. Perhaps your physiology just isn't suited to that, and you've got to really communicate with your body to go, hang on, how can I adapt this to make it more easily for the body? Maybe just a subtle shift of the angle, maybe a change of the thumb placement slightly, maybe am I pressing too hard? Like having a very high level of awareness of what your body is communicating, and the feel in your hands is by far the best kind of feedback that you can get. Much better than a teacher kind of trying to teach you technique, because your body's actually teaching you, because it's telling you what works and what doesn't. So really cultivating that bodily awareness is the fifth and final and most important core principle of a good solid left hand technique. So to help you develop your left hand technique, I've put together a collection of coordination exercises for the left hand that you can find for the post for this video on my website, FretDojo.com, if you're not on my website already. And yeah, I found these exercises very useful for developing my own technique, and keep these 5 core principles that we've covered in today's video in mind as you play them. And I'll also have a bonus video that you can find there that will go through the exercises in detail for you. It would be great to get some feedback on this video. Please leave a comment below, and if you have any ideas for a future episode of this series, you can contact me on my website, FretDojo.com, and I'm also on Twitter as well. You can find me there. Okay, so we'll leave it there for today. Thank you very much, everyone, and happy strumming. See you soon. And a quick reminder before you go to download your free copy of the exercise worksheet for this lesson at www.FretDojo.com.